Good morning and welcome to today's New York City Council hearing for the Committee on Civil and Human Rights jointly with state and federal legislation. At this time, we ask that you silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Silence all cell phones and electronic devices. If you have testimony you wish to submit for the record, you may do so via email at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. We thank you for your cooperation. Chairs, we're ready to begin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Natasha Williams, and I serve as chair to the Committee on Civil and Human Rights. Our hearing today covers a topic that affects so many different aspects of everyday life: appearance-based discrimination. While common and rampant, is often overlooked in its impact. Appearance-based discrimination occurs when someone is treated differently based on how they look. This can include, but is not limited to, height, weight, hair, facial features, tattoos, or even how a person dresses or chooses to dress. This type of discrimination can also be linked to a person's racial, ethnic, or cultural background, but without the protections attached to categories of race, ethnicity, and religion that are ubiquitous in both federal and local regulations. I'm excited to be joined by my colleague, Councilmember Sean Abreu, who's been a great champion in this issue and making sure we held this very important hearing. He's also chair to the Committee on State and Federal Legislation. Today we'll be hearing two bills that he is sponsoring. The first bill is Intro 209, which would prohibit discrimination on the basis of a person's height or weight and opportunities of employment, housing, and access to public accommodations. The second bill, Intro 702A, would prohibit employment discrimination on the basis of having a tattoo. This legislation could serve to protect against a roadblock to employment that is both a nuanced and complex form of discrimination. Those who have lost out on things like employment opportunities or promotions due to their appearance can attest to the long-term ramifications of such unfair treatment. Anyone who was unable to enjoy a public space or received inadequate medical treatment due to their size knows firsthand the mistreatment that we are trying to prevent here today. In my role as chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, I am also stressing the importance of equity. So I'd be remiss not to point out the economic inequity of this very common form of discrimination. People whose appearance does not fit certain societal standards of attractiveness, appropriate size, and personal style can also be negatively impacted by appearance-based discrimination. I welcome everyone's feedback, testimony, and personal experiences that are being shared today and look forward to continued discussion surrounding this issue. I'll now turn it over to my colleague and co-chair, Councilmember Sean Abreu, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Williams. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. I'm Councilmember Sean Abreu, chair of the Committee on State and Federal Legislation, and I'm here this morning to declare that we're all bright and beautiful. And even if someone else doesn't think so, it still shouldn't make any difference to whether somebody can get a job or an apartment or do anything else they damn well please. New York City is ready to ban appearance-based discrimination. Now that we know why we're here, I'd like to thank my colleague, co-chair, Councilmember Natasha Williams, for working with me on this hearing. As she just mentioned, appearance-based discrimination can really impact an individual's life in many ways. Not only can it affect their mental health, but it can also impact their livelihood. And while some appearance-based discrimination can be based on a person's self-expression, like clothing or tattoos, it can also be based on features and physical traits and attributes that would otherwise be protected against discrimination. In my capacity as chair of the Committee on State and Federal Legislation, I am always looking at what our counterparts in other jurisdictions are working on. Last session, Congress considered passing the Crown Act, a bill that would prohibit discrimination based on a person's hair texture or hairstyle if that style is commonly associated with a particular race or national origin. In 2019, a version of this bill was passed at the state level here in New York. Additional efforts to put an end to appearance-based discrimination are underway in Albany. 2 bills at the state level have been reintroduced to this session. These bills would protect New Yorkers who have experienced weight or height discrimination in employment or housing, and would make it illegal for them to be denied service in any place of public accommodation, such as a hotel or restaurant, due to their weight. While I applaud these state and federal efforts, we cannot always wait for their passage to make change right here in New York City. This is why I am proud to be sponsoring Intro 209, protecting people from height and weight-based discrimination, where they are not part of an essential job function. We've heard and will hear today many instances of discrimination where employees are relegated to the back of the clothing store to stock shelves instead of being at the cash register, for example. Our bill, importantly, also protects height and weight discrimination in housing and public accommodations. I think we can all agree that someone's appearance should not impact something so basic as their right to housing or being able to access public space. I am also proud to introduce 70A, protecting people from discrimination on the basis of having tattoos. A recent poll reported that 1 in 3 people have a tattoo. Even with their popularity, there are currently no laws on the local, state, or federal level regarding this type of discrimination. I am proud to have this bill being heard today, as it similarly impacts service workers and other public-facing employees who may face appearance-based discrimination due to the stigma around tattoos. I look forward to the feedback and testimony we'll be receiving today on these bills, and hope that they will one day make a difference in the lives of New Yorkers that have experienced appearance-based discrimination. I'd like to wrap up by saying thank you to the members of the Civil and Human Rights Committee that have joined us today, as well as committee staff, J Street Ganapathy, and William Diori, and my staffer, Jaleesa Quigley. I'll now turn it over to our moderator for some procedural items.
Thank you, chairs. Good morning and welcome. My name is Jayshree Ganapathy, and I am counsel to the Committees on Civil and Human Rights and State and Federal Legislation. I would first like to acknowledge the council members that are joining us today. We have Councilmember De La Rosa and Councilmember Marte. Before we begin testimony, I would like to remind everyone that is joining us via Zoom that you will be on mute until you are called to testify. I will be calling on public witnesses to testify after the conclusion of the administration's testimony and council member questions, so please listen carefully for your name to be called. Council members, you will be called on for questions after the full panel has testified. Please note, for the purposes of this hearing, council members will have 3 minutes for questions, and we will be allowing a second round of questioning. For the public witnesses, once your name is called, if you are joining us via Zoom, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will give you the cue to begin. If you are here in person, once your name is called, please come up to the table and you can begin your testimony when everyone has been situated. I'll now swear in the administration. We have representatives today from the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And panelists, if you could please raise your right hands. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner Campbell-Ford, you can go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Williams, Chair Abreu, committee members, and committee staff, as well as members of the public who are here today. I'm Joanne Campbell-Ford. I'm Deputy Commissioner of Policy and External Affairs at the New York City Commission on Human Rights, and I'm joined for questions by Hilary Scrivani, who's Senior Policy Counsel at the Commission. Thank you first for convening today's important hearing. Before turning to Intro 209, which, as was already stated, would make it unlawful for employers, housing providers, and providers of public accommodation to discriminate against individuals based on height and weight, and Intro 702A, which would make it unlawful for employers to discriminate against individuals on the basis of having a tattoo, I will highlight some of the Commission's history and recent work that's relevant to the topics that we're talking about. So I think, as many people know, the New York City Commission on Human Rights is the agency that enforces the city's human rights law, one of the broadest and most protective civil rights laws in the country. And the Commission interprets the law's protections expansively consistent with the statute itself. The Human Rights Law prohibits discrimination in the areas that are referenced in Intro 209, housing, employment, and public accommodations, and currently covers 27 protected categories, which include age, gender, religion, disability, race, national origin, gender, gender identity, and sexual orientation. To fulfill our dual mandate of enforcement and fostering intergroup relations, the Commission's two largest units are law enforcement and community relations. The Community Relations Bureau is responsible for outreach and education and partners with a wide array of community groups, sibling agencies, and stakeholders across the city. In fiscal year 22, we engaged more than 100,000 New Yorkers through our community relations work. Our Law Enforcement Bureau conducts testing, launches investigations, initiates complaints, enters settlements that address individual and structural discrimination, and also takes cases to trial at oath. The Commission's own roots can be traced back to the Depression era. During the 1940s, Mayor LaGuardia established the Mayor's Commission on Conditions in Harlem in response to uprisings in Harlem and to better understand the issues facing residents of our city. This committee eventually became the Committee on Unity and was guided by the goal of making New York City a place where people of all races and religions may work and live side by side. Subsequently called the Commission on Intergroup Relations, in 1955, our agency gained the ability to investigate complaints. And really, at its inception, the Commission was tasked with studying the problems of prejudice, intolerance, and bigotry, as well as discrimination in New York while promoting intergroup relations. From 2001 through 2014, City Council amended the law 12 times. Since 2015, City Council has amended the Human Rights Law 38 times. The law's expansive protections already reach some forms of discrimination that relate to appearance. This includes where appearance intersects with protected categories such as race, religion, and disability. In 2019, the Commission issued guidance affirming that grooming policies targeting natural hair constitute unlawful discrimination under the Human Rights Law. The guidance focuses on the significant negative impact of such policies on Black New Yorkers and highlights the links that race, religion, and culture have with hair. The guidance notes that there may be some circumstances where legitimate health or safety concerns justify certain grooming policies, but where a legitimate health or safety concern exists, there are often more tailored ways to alleviate the concern rather than just having blanket bans on natural hair or head coverings. For restrictions on hairstyles, the Commission considers them discriminatory unless there's a legitimate and non-speculative basis for the restrictions, and such restrictions are narrowly tailored. The Commission will also assess whether no alternative policies would achieve a similar aim. I want to just mention one case in this area that illustrates the Commission's efforts to address discriminatory practice. So the Law Enforcement Bureau resolved a case involving a salon that faced allegations of discrimination because its grooming policies targeted Black employees with natural hair and hairstyles associated with Black people. In the settlement, the salon agreed to pay a penalty as well as to establish a natural hair program, training employees on cutting and styling natural hair, and to create a multicultural internship program to develop and mentor student stylists from underrepresented groups, and to increase employee representation from those groups as well. And the natural hair protections that I'm talking about are now memorialized in the Commission's rules. The Commission has also addressed discrimination that includes an individual's size. The agency has settled one case where an employer who discriminated against a pregnant employee, where the employer mocked the individual's weight and criticized her diet. The employer paid compensatory damages and educated its employees about their rights as a result of the settlement in that case. And in another example where an employee alleged his supervisor made derogatory comments regarding his weight and race, the employer paid emotional distress damages, civil penalties, and also educated employees about the Human Rights Law. The Human Rights Law's prohibitions on discrimination based on disability and religion also reach some appearance-based discrimination. For example, obesity may constitute a covered disability, and disability, just as a reminder, is defined in the Human Rights Law as a physical, medical, mental, or psychological impairment, so it includes a wide array of identities. Additionally, where a physical characteristic that's part of a religious practice or observance, it would be a violation of the human rights law to discriminate against an individual based on that characteristic. For both disability and religion, the human rights law requires employers to provide what we call reasonable accommodations to enable an individual to fulfill the essential functions of their job, as long as the accommodation does not place an undue hardship on the employer. An accommodation that interferes with safe or efficient operations may constitute an undue hardship for an employer. In addressing the prohibitions on discrimination in the human rights law, the law seeks to balance individual rights and the health and safety of members of the public, whether that's in employment, in housing, or in public accommodations. And that's reflected in the reasonable accommodations framework I just mentioned. Intro 209 would add height and weight as protected categories under the human rights law. It would forbid discrimination based on actual or perceived height and weight in employment, housing, and public accommodations. Michigan adopted weight and height protections in 1976, and since then, a handful of cities have followed suit. The administration supports the intent of the bill to ensure that New Yorkers do not face discrimination based on the physical attributes of height and weight, while taking into account health and safety consistent with the existing framework of the human rights law. The administration is also continuing to review The administration is continuing to review Intro 209, which is height and weight, and looks forward to hearing from stakeholders and reading testimony submitted for today's hearing, as well as working with City Council to identify the most effective approach to addressing discrimination based on height and weight. Turning to Intro 702, which would make it unlawful for employers to discriminate against individuals on the basis of having a tattoo, the administration looks forward to learning more about this issue from stakeholders and continuing to work with City Council to explore the most effective ways to ensure that individuals are not discriminated against because of who they are and what they look like. In closing, the Commission is committed to addressing discrimination and identifying gaps in protections that limit the ability of New Yorkers to live, work, and thrive in our city. We look forward to working with Council to ensure that suitable approaches are taken to address unfair discrimination based on one's physical attributes. We appreciate the Council's attention and commitment to combating discrimination in New York City, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you for your testimony. My first question is, with regard to Introduction 209 and 702A, does CCHR foresee any need for additional resources in its capacity as the enforcement agency? And with regard to enforcement, what hurdles, if any, does CCHR anticipate should these bills be enacted?
Thank you. I think our commission is very proud of our staff and the work of our agency. I've mentioned the number of times our law has been amended, and I think every time that happens, we have, no matter how many staff we've had, we have proven to take a results-oriented approach that is first and foremost about educating New Yorkers about their rights, because prevention of discrimination is always our number one goal. We work closely with City Council members, with sibling agencies who often also have jurisdictions in the areas we're talking about, and really closely with community groups, both to get the word out through trainings, days of outreach, and days of visibility, as well as through social media and print media campaigns that are always in multiple languages to ensure we're meeting all New Yorkers who might benefit from the protections, as well as housing providers and employers and providers of public accommodations. I think one thing I am proud to report at this hearing is that we have been staffing up during this administration, and we think we can hit the ground running to educate New Yorkers about these protections and also to enforce them in areas where we're already quite familiar. And the second part of the question was around enforcement, right? And what, if any, things, can you repeat that second question, Chair?
With regard to enforcement, what hurdles, if any, does CCHR anticipate should these bills be enacted?
Sure. So I think every time our law is enacted, there's an education and awareness barrier, and that's for all New Yorkers. So we always start first with our staff. You know, we have internal trainings about what these things look like and how to enforce cases, how to identify discrimination, and how to educate New Yorkers about their rights. Every time our law is amended, we also hear that it's a burden on housing providers and public accommodations and businesses because areas of law are complex and there's lots of intersecting rules and regulations. But that is always the case. I think our goal and hope for these bills is that if they are passed, that they are well aligned with our existing enforcement framework. And I mentioned a few elements of what we look at in the instance of hair discrimination, what we look at in instances of disability, right? Balancing the goal of equity, which I think this administration and the commission and all of you share, with ensuring that those with obligations understand what they are and New Yorkers can vindicate their rights.
Thank you for that. I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Rita Joseph, who's joining us. Has CCHR ever received inquiries or complaints in relation to appearance-based discrimination?
Thank you for that question, Chair Abreu. Appearance-based discrimination, as Deputy Commissioner Ward stated in her testimony, does come under the city human rights law if it is linked to a category that's already protected. So we have 27 protected categories in our laws. So one example that Deputy Commissioner Ward mentioned is in the instance of hair discrimination. So discrimination based on natural hair can fall under race discrimination. There's also instances of discrimination related to hair falling under religion, which is another protected category. So our we have had instances where appearance-based discrimination has come to the commission and, in fact, been related to violations of our law. Yeah, if it's related to an already protected category, then it has come to the commission.
So is it fair to say that complaints for appearance-based discrimination are often linked to other types of discrimination, or?
So I would say what appearance-based discrimination, how the commission captures it, those instances, it's linked to already protected categories. But I will note that because, for, example, like height and weight, which are, the issues in Intro 209, since those are not protected categories currently under the law, our data wouldn't capture, those issues if they're not linked to already protected category.
Great, and you kind of went into this in your testimony a bit, but if you can expound upon it a little more. What is your feedback on Intro 209? I see that the administration supports the intent behind the bill, which is really exciting news.
Sure. So I think there are a couple of pieces that we're keen to really think about, really also after hearing and reading the testimony from today, to understand how these issues are playing out in New York City today for residents. But I think in general, going back to the question you asked about enforcement, we think it is helpful when the terms and kind of protections in our law are aligned so that there's a parallel structure between what might exist for race and religion and national origin and what might exist for height and weight, both to clarify the law, again, for impacted New Yorkers, but also for the housing providers and employers that will have obligations when the law is changed. And so some of that is about, again, balancing equity with clarity and legitimate business operations. So as I said, kind of in the hair context, we look at what is the policy and whether there's a legitimate health or safety rationale for what the policy at place would be. And I think we would take ideally the same approach to height and weight. If there's a height and weight threshold for a position, is that connected to the essential functions of a job in the employment context, right? Are there health and safety rationales for a particular requirement for a job? And I could imagine in businesses or in public accommodations, there's also going to be health and safety regulations and building codes and things like that that we need to consider. So from the administration's perspective, it's really about balancing those objectives.
To your knowledge, has CCHR received any complaints related to height and weight discrimination?
Thank you for your question. I think Deputy Commissioner Ward mentioned 2 examples where there were cases where weight discrimination was linked to a category that's already protected in the law. So, for example, one of the examples involved a pregnant employee who was told derogatory comments about her weight. There was also an employee who experienced discrimination, race discrimination, and that included derogatory comments about weight. So in those instances, there have been cases as far, but again, because they're linked to race and pregnancy, which are already protected in the law. As far as height, we haven't had that issue come to us specifically that we're aware of. Again, our data, wouldn't necessarily capture that since it's not already protected in the law. But I will note that when it comes to weight discrimination, we're aware that, body type discrimination, there might be an intersection between, height and weight. And what I mean by that is, a taller individual of a certain weight might not experience discrimination the same way as someone at the same weight who's not as tall. So it certainly can come into play there. But as far as tattoos, again, that, if it, it would be protected if it relates to a category that's already in the law, but we are not aware of any instances of tattoo discrimination.
And I think the only thing I'll add to that, and I mentioned this a little bit in the testimony as well, that both height and weight can, in certain instances, fall within what is defined as a disability under our law. I know there's controversy about that framework, but just wanted to clarify that that would come under some of our protections. But as my colleague said, we're not aware of any tattoo or height-related cases.
Thank you. Speaking about disability in the ADA, if obesity is classified as a disability, how does that impact the perception of people who are overweight, disabled?
So I think I'm not going to speak to the ADA, and I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question. I think we look at parallels, though, from pregnancy, which is a protected class in our law, and under federal law in some jurisdictions is considered a disability. There was a move to change that perception, and I understand, at least anecdotally from advocates, that there can be stigma associated with disability that doesn't relate to their own experience. The other thing I will say, though I'm no expert on the case law on disability, there are jurisdictions where it's required to show an underlying condition to benefit from that protection, and that's at the federal level. Our law is much more expansive, and we read it more expansively, but that would be something from the legal side.
Yeah, and you may provide a similar answer here with my next question, since it's very ADA, maybe ADA specific. Are there thresholds for overweight people to meet in order to be classified as disabled? Because the accommodations aspect is very important.
So there are no set thresholds under our law. I think this goes to my colleague Hillary's points. It's in our experience and what we've read and heard, body size there's no number, right, or no specific height that might bring that into play. It's often individualized and related to other identity characteristics. I'm also just not aware of what the threshold might be under federal law. And then the last piece I'll say is the disability framework that exists with reasonable accommodations. Just to be clear for the folks who may not have read in detail the legislation, like we have, that's not included in this version of the law. So it's something that exists in our law for disability, domestic violence, religion, and pregnancy.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Chair Williams.
Thank you. So, I'm always thinking about how we actually educate people on our laws, because so many people don't even know we have such an expansive Title VIII, and they could come to your agency for support. So does CCHR plan to provide any trainings or workshops to educate and raise awareness if these bills were to pass?
I rarely can offer an emphatic yes, but anytime our law is amended, we really, as I was saying, our number one priority is that people know about the protections in the law. So we would, at a minimum, develop written materials in multiple languages and do days of outreach, and we would definitely incorporate the changes into our training, which we do several hundred at least a year all over New York City. But if we look at just the way we approached the hair guidance, which wasn't even a change in the law, it was an articulation and interpretation of what our law already said. We have a legal guidance, which is for lawyers and judges and anyone else who has time to spend reading legal guidance. But we also have a fact sheet, and we have FAQs, and we've done campaigns and videos on that. And I think we evaluate who needs to know about the change, both from a business perspective side and from an impacted individual side, and we do our best to target at the start of a campaign those groups, and then to ensure that everyone in New York City knows about these protections.
Thank you. And you actually just mentioned the hair discrimination guidance. That was back in 2021, 2019. But you guys did something in 2021.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry.
No, go.
Yeah, so the rules were amended in 2021 to add hair discrimination, so they were added to the rules in 2020.
Okay. No, I remember participating in like a public hearing thing you all did.
Yeah, so we had every time we amend our rules, we do a public hearing, and then when we're thinking about legal guidance, we often do roundtables with experts, and I mean that in the widest way possible, people who have experienced the type of discrimination we're addressing, to ensure that the information that we're putting out there is accurate and helpful and resonates with New Yorkers.
Okay, so since the initial guidance in 2019 and revised guidance in 2022 to hair discrimination and the passage of the New York Crown Act, how often has CCHR received or investigated complaints of natural hair discrimination? I know you mentioned the one case, but...
Yeah, so we've had 6 cases total since the guidance. That's including the case that we settled. And, I'll also mention that hair discrimination, it's a type of race discrimination or discrimination based on religion typically. So it is part of that, larger category and data set of discrimination.
Got it. Does CCHR believe height or weight-based discrimination are covered under protective categories? I think you already answered that. Did you ask this question?
You can ask again.
No, it's okay. I think you talked about how it could potentially be covered under disability rights. Okay. I don't have any other questions. I just want to acknowledge that Councilmember Joseph is here. Do you have any questions? Okay. I think you guys answered everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll give this panel a few minutes to clear up and then move on to public testimony. So bear with us for a moment. Thank you. We will now call the first panel of public witnesses. If you have not registered and you wish to testify, please speak to the Sergeant at Arms and fill out a witness slip. If you registered in advance online, please also make sure to fill out a witness slip so we have a record of your attendance. On this first panel, we have Ino Awotoye, Josh Kellerman, and Tigris Osborne. You can come up to the table, and once everyone is situated, you can get started. So panelists, just so you are aware, you do have 2 minutes to testify once the sergeant starts the timer. And council members, if you have any questions for a particular panelist, please let me know. And I will call on you when the panelists have completed their testimony.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Eno Awotoye. I'm the coordinator for the Retail Action Project. And this is a worker center for New York City retail workers who are in retail and other industries, allied industries. The Retail Action Project rallies non-union workers in New York City to improve opportunities mostly for workers here. Our membership is diverse, consists of workers and job seekers from immigrant, low-wage, LGBTQ2+, and other marginalized communities who already face a lot of job insecurities. Now, when size discrimination is added, the impact is devastating. We asked our members if they or someone they knew had experienced size discrimination. Most of them answered yes. Today, I'd like to share the experiences of two women who would have liked to be here, but because of childcare and concerns about their privacy, they asked that I share their experience without their names attached. The first one, Initial TM, is a luxury brand specialist. And she shares, after enjoying over 3 years of highly rewarding job opportunity, I had gotten pregnant and started to put on some baby weight, which did not affect my productivity at all. At first, I got some friendly advice to watch my weight, to remember that I was representing a luxury brand. By the time I got back from having my baby, I got moved around so much, eventually, I ended up in the stock area. I lost my commission because of this, and because I no longer fit the image of the company. It's very hurtful to be judged unfit or incapable just because I put on weight. CF is a sales associate, and she shares, I had added some weight when I took time off to raise my family. On my return, I found it very hard to secure a job. At screenings or interviews, there will be questions or comments about fast-paced work environments and if I could cope. I started to realize that my weight had something to do with my difficulty in finding a job. It was very stressful. Eventually, I did a phone interview, and it was successful. I was hired and given a start date. At the orientation, I was told that I would get a schedule. It never came. Each time I called, I was told that they were waiting for a position to open up. I am still looking for full-time work, and it's been 3 years. It's unfair that we have no protection from this kind of treatment. We all have heard these kind of stories about size discrimination. It's wrong, and it should be banned. The New York City Council should pass this bill, the height and weight bill, and make sure they protect workers, give workers equal access to opportunities, and to ensure respect and dignity of labor. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tigris Osborne. I'm the chair of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. As the chair of the world's oldest fat rights group, I'm here to speak on behalf of thousands of people who have been part of NAFA, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, over the last 54 years, and also on behalf of millions of fat people in New York City today, whose lives will become better because of Councilmember Abreu's bill to ban height and weight discrimination. You may not be used to hearing the word fat in the matter-of-fact way that we use it at NAFA. Those who support fat rights utter the F word, practically, even enthusiastically, as a descriptor instead of an insult. Fat people are people. That should go without saying, but sometimes it does not. We are disrespected or ignored in far too many aspects of life, and too many people believe nasty stereotypes about us. There are uncountable ways that the world harms fat people, and that harm is even greater when we are also Black or brown people, LGBTQIA plus people, or disabled people. Anti-fatness doesn't just break our hearts, it drains our wallets, steals our opportunities, and limits our lives. We're prevented from doing jobs we're skilled at, from living in communities we love, and from participating fully in the lives of our own hometowns because people don't make space for us. And that has to stop. As the chair of NAFA, I get asked about size discrimination a lot, and often people are very surprised to learn how few places in the world have legal prohibitions against size discrimination. People are especially surprised about this, about New York City, which prides itself as a beacon of worldwide welcome, of opportunity, of equality. Yet we know that at least 2 million people experienced size discrimination in 2019 in New York City. Sometimes it's just malicious, like the person who spit on my friend on the bus in the Bronx and then screamed in her face about how she was taking up too much space. Sometimes, though, it's simple oversight, like a city council chamber without enough seats that are safe for larger bodies. Either way, New York can do better, and you're about to. When the rest of the City Council joins the 30 co-sponsors of INT 0209 to pass this bill, New York will become the most populous city in the world to protect its residents and visitors from size discrimination. I traveled over 2,000 miles to be with you today because, like so many other generations of fat people, I had to be in New York when this city was making history for equality at every size. When the Central Park Fat-In was held here in 1967, or when the first National NAFA Conference was held here over 50 years ago, this is exactly what those advocates were working towards. The beacon of freedom will shine even brighter in New York City, when it includes the freedom to thrive at any size. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Josh Kellerman. I'm the Director of Public Policy at the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. We represent approximately 40,000 workers in New York. Our members work in retail, including grocery and pharmacy, food service, food processing, distribution, cannabis, building services, warehouses, car washes, agriculture, and we also represent workers in apparel retail and fashion retail. I sit before you today to testify in support of ending discrimination against people based on their body size. In the industries we organize in, particularly in fashion retail, this problem is rampant. Workers are routinely punished for not fitting the image perceptions set by employers, causing both financial and personal challenges for workers. We know that making this sort of conduct illegal won't change these discriminatory practices overnight, but it will provide workers with a route to fight back against the most egregious forms of discrimination and will also help to shift the culture around body shaming. If we can achieve these goals through this bill will be viewed as an important step in the march towards equality. As a union whose members are majority women of color, it is important to highlight the ways that body image discrimination often goes hand in hand with racial discrimination and bias against women. Height and weight discrimination is intertwined with social justice and racial discrimination. Studies show that people of color in the U.S., Black and Latino, are more likely to be of a higher weight than white people. Black Americans are likely to be on average 1 inch shorter than white Americans, and Asian and Latino Americans average about 3 inches shorter in height than their Caucasian counterparts. Women in America are more likely than men to be considered quote-unquote obese, and studies show that women are more likely to be discriminated against men due to their appearance. And this discrimination undermines New Yorkers' ability to earn a living. One study on the issue showed that showed that larger workers earn lower wages and are more likely to be viewed negatively by hiring managers. Larger people's performance is more likely to be viewed negatively by supervisors. Weight bias hurts workers' overall compensation, performance evaluations, and even the quality of the training that they receive. One thing to note is that at unionized businesses, overt appearance-based discrimination is much less common than in non-unionized workplaces. This is because with the union, workers have a built-in grievance mechanism to protect themselves from arbitrary employer decisions. In non-union workplaces, however, there are no similar protections. In fact, employers at non-union workplaces can fire or discipline a worker simply for failing to meet the store's vanity size requirements. This is not right. Intro 0209 will protect countless New Yorkers from blatant appearance-based discrimination. Every single New Yorker deserves the right to a workplace free of prejudice and discrimination, and every industry in New York needs to recognize that good workers come in all shapes and sizes. Please pass this bill now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. We'll move on to the next panel. We have,
I just wanted to find out, good morning. Thank you for this. This is important. How has appearance-based discrimination affect your day-to-day life?
I want to say that it is based on our appearance, but also there are a lot of actual accessibility things about size and space that affect my daily life. I traveled here from Phoenix to be here today. I know this is not your purview as city council to change airline policies, but I had to purchase 2 seats in order to travel safely and comfortably on the plane. I traveled from the plane to the airport in an Uber, and I had to travel without a seatbelt because they did not have a seatbelt extender that would fit me. When I checked into my hotel, I am fat and disabled, which means that I need an accessible room, but not everything in the accessible room is weight rated for a person my size. So in addition to the sort of daily ways that I just experience judgment, I've been a retail worker. I know some of the things that Josh is talking about. In addition to the daily ways that it's affected me in my work and in interpersonal interactions, there are things like when we go out to lunch after this meeting to hopefully celebrate the good reception that we received here. We'll have to choose a restaurant according to whether we can all fit the seats and whether we can all pass through the spaces inside the restaurant and whether there are public bathroom stalls there that are large enough for us to sit in without the toilet paper digging into our hips on the sides. So really, everywhere we go, we have to think about our size differently than our smaller counterparts if we're wide people. And then, of course, our friends of short stature have the same issue in the opposite direction in terms of having to just think differently about literally everything we do in life because we can't get there and take for granted that someone else has thought about us. Today we had to work with the Equal Opportunity Office to arrange for special chairs. The testimony chairs are great for fat people, thank you. But the chairs for people who are coming to witness testimony are not always great for fat people. Those white folding chairs are our nemesis. And so just everything we do, we have to do extra planning, we have to seek extra accommodations, and we have to often do that with limited financial resources because of the employment discrimination that we face.
Well, thank you for that. And the unions, how can this be helpful?
We spend a lot of time dealing with grievances based on all sorts of issues that a worker faces in their day-to-day experience where the employer has unilateral decision-making authority over what happens in the workplace. And so in unionized workplaces, we have a grievance procedure set up to deal with that. Anything that we can take off the table where we're not having to grieve over it is a benefit ultimately to the overall functioning of a successful workplace. So if we don't have to deal with appearance-based discrimination anymore because City Council has legislated it, ultimately that's exceptionally helpful to us. It's also something we don't have to negotiate in further contracts to deal with. This wouldn't be an issue we'd necessarily put it, but there are resources that go every single contract towards the grievance procedures, and if we just have less of a sort of onerous procedure because these things have been taken off the table by council, it's helpful.
Wonderful.
So that's something that's just a day-to-day impact that would be very beneficial to us.
Well, thank you so much, and welcome to New York.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for your thoughtful questions.
Thank you, and we have been joined by Councilmember Gutierrez. You're all, yeah, thank you. We will now call the next panel. We have Victoria Abraham, Dr. Gregory Dodell, and Stephanie Lexus. You can get started whenever you're ready.
Hi, sorry. My name is Victoria. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak. I just graduated from college in New York this past year, and while I loved my New York experience, I couldn't help but compare it to the experience of my peers. People walking past me with their quick New York stride, hearing the snide comments about how I walk too slow and I take up too much space on the sidewalk. The quick sideways glances as I enter the bus, bags placed on the seat next to them, their biggest fear being touched by fat flesh. Forcing my body through the turnstiles at the train station, turning sideways just to barely squeeze through those metal bars. Having to contact the Center for Disabilities at my school requesting a special accommodation for a desk capable of containing my body. My choices being sit at the special desk at the back of the class, serving as a reminder to the room that I don't fit, or suffer in silence, wood digging into my side, hoping that I remember the lecture, because at that angle there's no way I would get a pen to paper. Something as simple as being able to sit in my seat and take notes like my peers, I did not have the privilege of doing. I had to get accommodations because my school didn't once consider my needs, and I was put at a disadvantage. I wasn't the only student that couldn't fit in those seats. I was just one of the few that knew I deserved better and asked for it. I am consistently doing little things every single day to survive in a city that does not take fat people into consideration. I'm reminded every day that this world, this city that I love so dearly, is built without my body in mind. And that's what's so insidious about anti-fatness. It's everywhere. Sometimes it's not even malicious, it's just in the little things that you would never even notice if you aren't fat. But for people like me, I live my life taking extra steps, making the necessary accommodations just to survive. Every time I squeeze my body into a chair or turnstile that is clearly made for a different body, a smaller body, I'm reminded that I am not considered. I feel like an intrusion, an inconvenience, like I don't belong here. Passing this bill tells fat people that we aren't alone, we're not unwanted, and having the government behind us makes sure that we'll no longer feel as though we're a mere inconvenient afterthought. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Dodell. I'm an endocrinologist here in New York City. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. As a physician, this issue is important to me because weight-based discrimination is not only a human rights issue, but also a healthcare issue. Research clearly demonstrates the negative health consequences of discrimination. Discrimination is associated with an increased risk of high blood pressure, high blood sugar, inflammation, and has impacts on mental health. I see this every day in my medical practice. My hope is that passing this bill will alleviate the stress that many of my patients face on a day-to-day basis so I'll have the opportunity to lead healthy lives. Among the things that I try to discuss with my patients are stress management, nutrition, movement, and sufficient sleep. When you look at the far-reaching impacts of weight-based discrimination, wages, housing, access to healthcare, these behaviors become much more cumbersome. We know that weight stigma causes people to avoid going to the doctor and having preventive health screenings. Unfortunately, much of the research regarding health and weight don't account for this important variable that is highly prevalent. To put the magnitude of size discrimination into perspective, here are some staggering statistics. Size discrimination affects 34 million people in the United States. Nearly 84% of adults living in larger bodies report being shamed at least once in their lifetime because of their body size. 65% of adults in larger bodies have experienced discrimination at least once. As a doctor, and more importantly, as a human being, this matters. Enough is enough. Get this done.
Hello. As a child, I would periodically travel from New Jersey to Midtown Manhattan to be dazzled and inspired by Broadway musicals. It brought me much needed escapism and joy that I wanted to pursue the Great White Way myself. I dedicated years of studying musical theater and making myself the best performing artist I could be. I played everything from Cinderella and Into the Woods to Gretel and Hansel and Gretel. However, as my body grew bigger, my opportunities grew smaller. I found myself being passed over for leading lady and ingenue roles in favor of actresses in slimmer bodies. I particularly remember asking an instructor at a New York City musical theater intensive why I couldn't play a certain Disney princess, and she stuck up her pinky and said, "You need to be this." My proficiency and talent didn't matter. I didn't have the so-called Broadway body. In 2019, I founded Broadway Body Positivity Project to advocate for theater actors of marginalized body types like myself. The past 4 years, I've met so many incredible fat actors who have faced size discrimination in the theater industry, yet they have so much to offer it. They're so eager to work, yet find themselves having significantly less job opportunities. If INT 0209 is passed, fat actors will be able to audition for roles on Broadway or national tour because they won't be required to fit the previous actor's costume. Actors' equity could better protect their members, and fat theater goers would see themselves represented on stage. I hope you vote for this bill for people like me and anyone who has big Broadway dreams and a big body.
I don't have any questions. I just had a comment. I was just gonna say that resonated with me because I grew up in dance school, and yeah, that was a thing for like ballerinas to be really. I mean, you know, even I'm like overweight for like what the size of ballerinas are, and that has always been a current theme that I kind of grew up with. So I just wanted to tell you that that resonated with me, and like I completely understand, like as a performing artist, the many discriminations that still exist to this day. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilmember Salamanca. We now will call Lydia Green, Kimberly Singh, and Tracy Cox.
My name is Kimmy Singh, and I'm an eating disorder dietitian and a fat activist based here in New York City. I'm going to ask you all to take a moment and wonder why fat discrimination is so accepted. I'm sure that you all have your own relationship with fatness, even if you are thin. I'm sure you all know what it's like to fear gaining weight, to fear being in a larger body, maybe not related to your body image issues, but maybe because of the access issues. It's important for me to note that there's a lot about weight that you might not understand. All of the research shows that it's incredibly easy to put weight on, but significantly proven to be very difficult to lose weight. Over 90% of diets result in weight regain within 2 to 5 years. This means that although you might have been told that weight is entirely in your control, the research shows that that's not the case. When the majority of people diet, their bodies actually respond to diets like they are in famine. So this means that their body is holding on to that fat, just kind of protecting themselves from experiencing famine again. I had all of that to say that it's really common that weight is under someone's control. So in that case, it's okay if they face discrimination, right? Well, no, even if that were the case, it's definitely not. But I should name that for somebody my size, the chances of me being in a quote unquote normal size body is 0.15%. Just to repeat, 0.15%. So if I have to wait to be at that size to be treated equally, I'll probably be waiting my entire life. People assume that if you shame fat people, it will cause them to hate their bodies enough to lose weight, and so in that case, weight discrimination should be legal, right? Well, actually, as Dr. Dodell pointed out, what we find is that the research suggests that not only is this inhumane, but experiencing anti-fat stigma increases the likelihood of binge eating, increased caloric consumption, and less engagement in physical activity. In summary, this means that when somebody is fat shamed, they are far less likely to engage in healthy behaviors. Experiencing weight stigma also increases the risk for depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, low self-esteem, and increases the risk of mortality by 60%. For me as a dietitian, I experienced an unfortunate amount of weight stigma throughout my training. When I was in graduate school, I had a 4.0 GPA. I had glowing recommendations from all of my professors, but I could not find any volunteer experience. So this is unpaid volunteer experience that all of my peers were receiving, the same positions that I would apply for. Everything would move along until they met me in person. When I went on to complete my rotations, my supervisor told me that she was shocked that she was able to place me at my sites because people in far smaller bodies than mine were sent back because of their weight. They were explicitly told that they were too big to be in that position. Here in New York City hospitals, this is completely unacceptable. I'm going to remind you that these are all unpaid positions. In my work as a fat-positive eating disorder dietitian, I see this happening day to day. I work with individuals that experience weight discrimination on a very daily basis. I hold space for people to offload the pain that they experience. This is a pain that oftentimes goes unseen or is even mocked by society. It's a pain that isn't seen as worthy of recognition or action. That's why it's unfortunately legal in most of the country. And this is also why most people stay silent and don't report such cases. I see the impact that this has on people. It wears away on their will to live. It makes them feel utterly alone and unwanted by society. I hope that by voting to pass this bill, you will take a stand against this harmful form of legal discrimination.
Hello, my name is Lydia Green. I'm a resident of Brooklyn and a Democratic district leader. I've been working to pass this legislation since 2019, and I am grateful to the council for holding this hearing and giving us all the opportunity to speak on the deeply personal issue of weight discrimination. Existing in public in a fat body means always feeling like I'm physically in the way. There's one time I was taking the subway home from Penn Station that especially reinforced that feeling for me. The train was so crowded from rush hour that I was forced to squish up against a closed door and couldn't move. At one stop, the door started opening on the side where I was standing. An elderly man with a cane was trying to get on. I looked to my side to check that he had room to get in, and he did, but he paused as if he was waiting for me to move out of his way. I pushed myself further against the side and sucked at my stomach. Instead of walking onto the train, he picked up his cane and started tapping my body with it. I felt absolutely humiliated. Since then, I've become hyper aware of the space I take up in relation to others because I'm afraid of being assaulted again for having a body that takes up too much space. If public spaces had to be designed to accommodate all bodies, perhaps this man I encountered on the subway might not have felt so entitled to my personal space. Unfortunately, my experience with anti-fatness in public accommodations isn't unique. Between December 2019 and January 2020, I conducted a survey to gather stories around weight discrimination. I received over 150 responses with stories about all aspects of life, from healthcare to employment to education. I published the results in a policy brief with the help of the office of then Councilmember Brad Lander that you can find online. Here's one story relevant to this bill. My most memorable experience of discrimination was when I was at an amusement park on a ride. I was 14 and the seatbelt barely fit me, which is not fair in and of itself. Seatbelts and chairs should definitely support everyone, and we should be able to sue for not being serviced. The ride worker kept asking my weight and actually harassed me for it. I cried during the entire ride, and when I back up with my friends, no one understood the trauma I went through. I haven't been to an amusement park because of it since then. Clearly, fat people do not get fair or equal treatment to thin people in public spaces, housing, employment, and more, and it is high time that the law recognize the damage that this treatment causes us.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tracy Cox. I am an opera singer, currently on a contract with the Metropolitan Opera. So many of my fat comrades have spoken eloquently as to the insidious nature of anti-fat bias. It is quite literally everywhere, as we are hearing, from infrastructure to healthcare to employment to housing. I would also like to speak to my experience as a fat performer. If you were privy to the blatant and normalized body shaming and discrimination faced by fat performing artists, you would be rightly appalled. Fat opera singers in particular face a difficult dichotomy. The general public associates opera itself with fatness, and yet buy a ticket to anything at the Met and you will clearly see that a fat singer is the rare and remarkable exception, not the rule. It's not an accident, it's not a secret. Weight stigma and discrimination is a sanctioned strategy in the performing arts. On behalf of all of the fat artists in New York City, I ask for our basic right to be able to show up at work without our bodies being fair game for criticism and derision. Let me do my job without being casually encouraged to develop an eating disorder or have bariatric surgery, which has happened to me countless times in the workplace. I ask, why should such a thing be legal in the workplace? New York City attracts the best artists in the world because there is no better place to make art. Please use your leadership to continue to show the rest of this country how it should be done and how the humanity of fat people matters and should be protected. Thank you.
Thank you for testifying, all three of you. Lydia, I know you've been involved as an author of the bill that's introduced a few years ago. I want to commend you again for your involvement with this bill. It's because of the advocates and people like you that we're pursuing this. Thank you.
I just want to plus. I just saw a post from Michelle Obama during Black History Month, and she posted this.
Libby.
Yeah, and I went down a rabbit hole of his whole story. So, yeah, again, I appreciate you sharing. And for those of you who don't know, it was a Black guy who was on Obama's first campaign election. He was overweight, and he was a singer, and he kind of decided not to do anything with his career, and then he did this amazing song one day, and then he decided to go back, and now he's singing everywhere. So
yeah, he just made his debut at the Met, and
yeah, he's the first Black guy to do.
The first Black Rodimus in Aida ever, which is ridiculous. So,
yeah, so it's a thing. It's a thing. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move over to testimony from our Zoom panelists. If you are joining us via Zoom, please wait for the sergeants to call time before you begin. And you will have 2 minutes. The timer should be up on the screen. Our first Zoom panelist is Brandy Solovey.
Starting time.
I received a call for help from someone I'll call Claire. I'm here to tell her story because she can't be. Claire needed a kidney transplant. She had her doctor's support, and her own friend was willing to donate. But Claire was fat. Not that fat, actually, not as fat as I am, but fat enough to have a BMI higher than 35. the blanket cutoff to be approved to receive a transplant. I am Brandy Solovey. Fat Legal Advocacy, Rights and Education Project is a project also known as FLAIR and a project of my law office. Discrimination based on weight happens in all aspects of a person's life. Kids are bullied in schools. They may not be able to find school uniforms that fit them. They literally don't fit in. As teenagers, they may be denied spots on a cheer or dance team. In college, they may not fit into school desks. They may have a hard time socializing because public venues like theaters and stadiums also do not have seats that fit. Fat adults have more limited job opportunities because we don't look the part. Even thin people face weight discrimination, like the woman who wore a size 4 when the norm in her New York City office was a size 0. Fat people face discrimination even in housing, possibly being denied housing or charged higher prices for housing. They may face direct hostility due to landlord stereotypes. The worst and most common cases are fat people who face discrimination because they are because of the combination of their weight and their race. Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by weight discrimination. This also unfairly impacts groups like transgender people who may be denied medical care, like gender affirming surgery due to weight bias. Laws that protect fat people don't cost much. And the great thing is, laws make it very clear
She can finish.
Thank you. What people's rights and responsibilities are. Right now, some people are already protected under disability law, but it's not clear who and when, and adding height and weight protections make it obvious that this discrimination is not allowed. Passing legislation in New York City won't fix all of the wrongs, but it is an important start. It's about time that fat people have a little justice in the Big Apple. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Next, we will call Caitlin Penner. You can go ahead when the sergeants call time.
Starting time.
Hi, good morning, commissioners and city council members. My name is Caitlin Penner, and I want to preface this with a content warning for eating disorders. When I was 11 years old, I was diagnosed with binge eating disorder, which is currently the most common eating disorder in the US. However, at the time, the landmark treatment for this was arguably a shame-based weight loss treatment that didn't teach me how to build a healthy relationship with food. And instead, it taught me a lot of destructive tools, like intense restriction of calories, that instead led me towards the development of a decade of restrictive eating disorders. Yet, despite the fact that now, as a 22-year-old, I've spent the last 4 years in recovery from bulimia nervosa, I would be considered a success story by many professionals due to the mere fact that I'm smaller than I was when I was 11. This should not be the case. The collateral damage from the war on obesity is clear. Policies by governments to address what is really a moral panic has worsened stigma against fat people, led to greater discrimination, and so much worse. Studies have consistently shown that this discrimination impacts low-income women specifically. Fat women earn as much as 12% less than thin women and are more likely to be in low-wage jobs. This discrimination can lead to negative health implications ranging from higher blood pressure to the development of restrictive eating disorders, a condition that is often underdiagnosed and undertreated in fat individuals. As a thin person, I have few problems finding employment, housing, or suitable public spaces for myself, but for fat New Yorkers, this is not the case. Navigable public spaces, subway seats, or even chairs are frequently inaccessible, which can cause great distress for fat New Yorkers as they have to take a myriad number of extra steps to get by every single day. This bill is about basic human dignity, and we need to do so much more to take care of our communities in New York City, but this is one big step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Councilmember De La Rosa. Or sorry,
I'm Gutierrez, but
sorry.
I will take that as a compliment. It's not a question. Caitlin, I love you so much, and thank you for testifying today, and thank you to all of our panelists for testifying today. Caitlin texted me early this morning basically saying, get on this bill, and I'm happy to support it because of so much of this testimony and the advocacy work that all of you have done. I love you, boo. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sorry about that.
It's a compliment, truly, don't worry about it.
Seeing no additional panelists, if there is anyone we inadvertently missed who would like to testify, please either speak to the Sergeant at Arms, or I don't see anyone on our Zoom at this point. If you bear with us a moment, I think we have one more panelist.
The scoop.
We are ready to call our last witness. Andrew Riggi, you can go ahead when the sergeant's called.
Starting time.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so glad I was able to get on here just to the end. My name's Andrew Riggi. I am the executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. We represent restaurants and bars and nightclubs throughout the 5 boroughs. Many of our owners and workers in our establishments have lots of tattoos. Nonetheless, we are very concerned about Intro 702 that would prohibit discrimination on the basis of having a tattoo for a few different reasons. I'm going to touch on 2 really quickly and appreciate your consideration. One is kind of a more high-level reason. We believe that adding tattoos to the list of protective characteristics covered by the human rights law, in a sense, trivializes the importance of the HRL as a vital tool against discrimination in the workplace. You know, with few exceptions, protected characteristics currently cover immutable traits like race, color, national origin, sexual orientation, that individuals cannot change. A person can't change their race, color, or national origin. There are some additional areas when it comes to domestic violence that also do deserve their own special protections because of longstanding challenges people suffer if they have such characteristics or have experienced such situations. But more specifically, from a practical matter in the hospitality and small business community, adding tattoos to a list of protected characteristics is going to provide a lot of liability for small business owners around some really difficult issues. I understand the bill has been amended or updated that would allow a provision for an employer to require an employee to cover up their tattoo, but sometimes
Your
tattoos cannot be. Oh, can I finish? One more minute. You cannot cover up their tattoos. This means that if an employer decided not to hire or to terminate an employee with a swastika tattoo on their neck or the N-word on their knuckles, or as a news article just had a big story, genitalia tattooed on their face, they would be subject to legal action by these potential employees or former employees that they terminated. And that provides a lot of liability and a lot of concern for small businesses that are often the target of many types of frivolous lawsuits. And we will put that into the record. I've also submitted additional written comment for your consideration, and we'd be happy to follow up with any of the members on any additional comment, but certainly something that raises concerns even in an industry that often welcomes personal expression with tattoos. This comes down to an operational and liability concern for restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you have any opinions, the restaurant industry, on Intro 209, which is based on height or weight-based discrimination?
You know, we didn't submit comments. We can get back to you with some additional comments. I did speak with some of our attorneys that specialize in this area, and they did feel that there were certain laws that perhaps do protect folks on matters like that, but I really wanted to focus the comments today just on 702.
Okay, and then on the tattoo bill, I think the example, yeah, no, I'm trying to formulate my question.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm gathering my thoughts. So the example that you gave, which was like a pretty egregious example, which is like a swastika on someone's neck. You know, I'm sure there are people walking around with swastika tattoos, but I'm just trying to understand like the subjectivity in that, in terms of like everybody having tattoos versus like tattoos that might be discriminatory in themselves. And so I feel like we should disassociate those two things. Like, you gave an example which was like a very extreme example, and we all can say, well, yeah, of course, as a business, you wouldn't want someone that has some type of discriminatory tattoo on their body to essentially be representing you, but that doesn't mean that everybody with a tattoo shouldn't be protected under the law.
Well, I mean, traditionally and historically, I understand what you're saying, and I think that's why, especially in our industry where so many people do have tattoos, it's an issue that we are sensitive to. And we're talking about the human rights law and immutable traits. Tattoo is a choice that an individual makes. So there's a question, I don't want to say it's a philosophical question, but somewhat about, you know, human rights laws protecting what kind of traits because if it's a tattoo, then you can certainly say anything. But I think there's many examples where people have face tattoos, neck tattoos, on their hands, and what is offensive or not is subjective. But people have tattoos that subjective to different people are offensive. And if a family wants to go in, or you want to go out with your parents, your grandparents, and they have a tattoo, someone could find it quite offensive. And as the law is drafted, it's my understanding that any one of those examples I gave, swastikas, N-words, genitalia, middle fingers, I mean, the list goes on, if you didn't hire someone because of that, you could be sued. Or if you had a current employee and they got one of these tattoos and came in, they could sue you if you terminated them. That's a real issue. I'm not sure if there's a way you're able to further amend the bill to address the subjectivity on it, because that gets quite complicated in itself. But I think that's in part what makes making a tattoo a protected trait problematic, because I'm not sure how you draw the line on the subjectivity.
Yeah, Andrew.
If that makes sense. Yes.
You have my number, but anyway, I have a point to make. Have you read 702A, which has been amended?
Yes, and that's the allowance for covering the tattoo, correct?
Correct. So if you have a tattoo on your hand or on your face, it can be covered.
I mean, a bandage on your neck, if something is inappropriate, it also creates a challenging work environment among colleagues. Someone could have something that would be offensive or problematic, and it creates a culture within the workplace that creates conflict.
Nothing stops an employer or restaurant owner from asking someone if they have something offensive. Nothing is stopping you from asking the person, prospective employee or not, whether or not what the intention of what's behind the tattoo, right? Nothing is stopping an employer from doing that. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, listen, I just know that I've seen tattoos that, and there was I won't get into it now, I can send you the article, but, the person with this tattoo on their face. And I guess you could ask someone to wear a huge bandage covering their neck, covering their face, putting Band-Aids or something over their knuckles. But
there's also
I guess,
makeup.
again, it just...
There's also
go ahead.
There's also makeup.
Yes, I mean, to put makeup on, face and neck and all of this, it is just another thing that, if you're running a business, you're hiring people and you're dealing with this, it creates another liability for employers. And again, it's enshrining a personal choice into a human rights law that is addressing immutable characteristics that people are born with, or in the more, other examples like domestic violence that I cited. So
I have a follow-up. If someone has a butterfly tattoo on their face, should they not have a job?
Well, no, but that's not what this bill says. There's many places that I said that, encourage people to show off their, their tattoos. And there's many different places that people can work, but that's also a personal choice of the individual. And sometimes in the case of a restaurant, this may be more of like a fine dining, but not always example. They want the focus to be on, the cuisine, on the service, not on the individual expressing themselves, where in another restaurant, they may want and encourage people to express themselves. And just because they had a tattoo, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be getting the job. Like I said, there's many people that show their tattoos off all the time, and it's a non-issue. I think we're just talking about the liability that exists as the law is drafted. Because I don't think the examples that I gave, while they are real, anyone would want to deal with a situation where someone had one of those very offensive tattoos there, but then the business to be sued if they were, terminated them or didn't hire them. I just don't know how you amend the bill further to draw that distinction.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Again, if we have inadvertently missed anyone that wishes to testify, please speak to the Sergeant at Arms. Seeing no additional witnesses, Chair, would you like to, either of you like to offer closing remarks and wrap?
Sure, we can both offer closing remarks. I want to just thank my chair here, Councilmember Abreu, for his leadership. I should have probably snagged that bill before him. This is a really good piece of legislation, and I think it'll help so many New Yorkers who have faced discrimination, and really listening to the stories resonated with me on so many different occasions, just in terms of my own upbringing, particularly as a dancer. So I appreciate everyone's testimony, and hopefully we can pass these laws expeditiously, and just also urge and encourage different industries to think about how their decisions or what society says is appropriate appearances affects everyday people who are trying to make a living for their families and themselves. And so I will turn it over to Councilmember Abreu to close this out.
Well, I just want to thank all of the advocates who are here today and to provide your powerful testimony on banning height and weight discrimination. I'm most optimistic than ever today that with your testimonies, your experiences, that it's going to push this council forward to do the right thing. And we're gonna ban appearance-based discrimination. I don't care what you have, or whether you have a butterfly tattoo or not. We're going to make sure that we're going to be fighting for all of you. We support fat acceptance here in this council, and the city accepts it as well. Let's bring it home. Thank you. I have to gavel out, which I forgot.